What's up, guys? I just read the latest chapter of Naruto 687. Obviously, it's coming to an end for sure. And I hope you guys have read it, so because I'm going to start spoiling it and talking about it. But man, wow. This chapter was all about Obito, and it went pretty quickly. There's some things I like about it. There's some things I definitely do not. What I don't like about it, I'm just gonna say first, because otherwise I'll forget. The ending, and you guys are gonna be like, why are you saying all this stuff that you don't like about it? It was such a beautiful chapter. I'll get to the stuff I liked eventually, okay? But let's just get this off my chest. The one thing I did not like was the portrayal of the afterlife. I think, first off, it's unrealistic that, in the afterlife, you return to a certain age. So in this case, at least from what's depicted, it seems like Obito and Rin returned to the age that they were at when they were like 11 years old. And so Rin and both of them know what's going on. And Obito's like, yeah, it took me a long time to get here. A lot of stuff happened during that time. I got lost along the way. Let's go. I don't very much I would say this. It's unrealistic in the fact that as far as choosing an age, that won't work for a lot of people. Especially, like, the older you'll get, the more you'll understand this. You can't just choose one age. And who's to say, like, there's some determinate best pure age for you to evolve to, in that sense, in the afterlife? It doesn't really make sense. It's like, no matter how you spin it, you're kind of screwed, because a lot of people identify with their elderly selves the most. So gray hair and so forth. In fact, a lot of people got famous the most after they got to an elderly age, and most people identify them like that. There's plenty of examples. Warren Buffett, gray white hair, Anderson Cooper. Like, one could argue like that's the age they would choose, but it's like there are a lot of people who have multiple ages that they define as a great time in their life. So they couldn't choose one over the other. So that's somewhat too one-dimensional and unrealistic. But it's hard to I feel like it'd be more realistic just to have auras afterwards, but at the same time, that in itself also would just look very lame. So I guess this sort of makes sense. But the other thing I don't like about that whole thing is that it sort of changes the whole taste of the chapter. It's like, don't worry, Obito is now safe and sound in the afterlife. Everything's good. Definitely changes the tone of things, because it's kind of like yet another cop-out by the author of Naruto. It's like, hey, I'm too scared to ever kill any supporting or main character in the series, even after 687 chapters. So therefore, even when I do, here you go, they're saved. It's like another like scapegoat, you can say. It's like, don't worry, they're all happy in the afterlife afterwards anyways. No matter what happens, it's another safety zone. And obviously, it's not completely true in the fact that there have been some really sad deaths, for sure. Haku's death, the bone guy who was under Orochimaru, who died right before almost before he speared Naruto and Rock Lee. Some people actually call me Rock Lee. Actually, just one person calls me Rock Lee in real life. They say I look like him. I don't think so. But moving on from that, I think there's been some really sad deaths. So I have to somewhat take back what I said in that the author is too scared to kill. Again, there's definitely other manga that are even worse offenders of this. Cough, cough, Toriko. Cough, cough. Can't kill anyone in this series. But again, even Toriko, they've killed a few people. So okay, I don't want to spoil anything, but you get the idea. There are definitely manga, and this I still think is a bit of a cop out regardless. And again, obviously, another good example is Gaara's grandmother, who used her technique to kill herself in order to save his grandson, even though he knew that, or she knew that she wanted to eventually save up this ability in order to revive Gaara's parents. By the way, I never really understood that, because it's like, when will you ever get the chakra or whatever, the master technique enough to revive Gaara's parents? From what I can tell, never, because Gaara's already gone rogue. Gaara's already, you know, crazy on a different level. He's already grown up, not to an adult form at that point, but it's kind of like, okay, how long is it going to take for you to master this thing? And why did you never tell Gaara about this? And I felt like Gaara was never really grateful for that whole thing, even after he was revived. He was just like, oh great, I'm revived, whatever. Anyhow, back to 687. So, you know, this, yeah, again, this last page, Rin, I made a promise to you. Yeah, and you tried your hardest all this time, didn't you? And then you see Obito just shocked. I've been watching, always. Let's go. And then Obito starts crying. And it's like, Uchiha Obito passes on. You know, a little bit of a cop-out. Like, don't get me wrong. I always want all the good people to have the best benefit ever. I hope that makes sense. I always want the good people to get the good results. But there comes a time when you've experienced enough stuff in real life that you realize that this is not realistic. And therefore you're like, okay, this is just too goody two shoes, you know. Even Obito, you know, he goes to afterlife. It's like, I've been watching you this whole time and you tried your hardest the whole time. First off, Obito, did you really? I mean, he definitely didn't try his hardest in that sense. I mean, he did, but there's a long period when he was corrupted and what he was trying real hard, but it was for the wrong thing. But again, you could definitely tell that this, you know, Obito was a very, I wouldn't say very warped, because I've seen more warped characters, but he was one of those warped characters who literally just fawned over this one girl who I don't think ever really expressed any clear signs that she liked him more than a friend, which is kind of sad. So it's kind of like, you know, you're being too desperate, okay? You realize that, hey, don't fawn over a girl before she's shown, before, you know, you really find her special and you understand that she finds you that amount special as well. But, you know, that's for my dating advice channel. This channel, you know, back on topic, it's just kind of funny, you know. Obito just doing his thing, crazy. Rin saying this stuff about, you tried your hardest, I've been watching, always. Obito shocked at the whole thing and starts crying. They link hands and then just, that's the end of the panel. Unrealistic in a sense, although, you know, at the end of the day, in a perfect world, I want everyone to achieve the best results. So again, in this world, I kind of understand it. Still, it's kind of cheesy and unrealistic. So even in this world, it kind of breaks the bonds of what I have to say. And honestly, it's, you know, at the end of the day, I'm glad for it. Like, hey, Obito had a good finish. More realistically, and definitely, if the author chose to do this, and he definitely could have, I feel like he may have considered it. Maybe he didn't even realize or consider it, but he definitely could have just cut it off there. No Obito afterlife stuff. It would have made a definite impact on most of the fan base reading this. They would have had definite emotional reaction to it. They would have been like, this is crazy, outrageous. Obito doesn't deserve such a crazy death. But at the same time, I feel like that would have been better. Not in the sense that it's the best result for Obito, because again, I want just my you know, good guy side of me wants every good guy to get the best results, and just have a happy ending. But on a realistic side of it, it's like, for it to be a better story, it would make more sense for at least there to be at least one sacrifice, like one innocent soul that's a main or supporting character in the series for at least a good amount of at least one arc, just sacrificed, like unrelented, you know, unjust sacrifice, just injustice, which would have spurred a dramatic change in Naruto. And this is what this chapter ended up depicting, but it did a bit of a cop-out, as I've already spent the first 10 minutes talking about, by adding this afterlife bit in the last 2 pages. And I definitely think the authors thought about, you know, excluding the afterlife bit at the end, because he's done this before with like one of the first arcs in the series, the Haku arc, Zabuza Haku arc, where both of them pretty much died in a very sad way. It was very unjust in a way, but at the same time they were mercenaries who did a lot of bad stuff, so it kind of made sense. It was more like people who did bad stuff who were at the end of the day good-hearted people who ended up changing their heart. And it was this whole mesh of, we don't even know if this is a good or bad guy. They were good people overall when they died, but it was still a very sad thing. And so that was the Haku Zabuza arc, and because of that, I definitely think that the author was depicting something like this again, where like a person dies in a very unjust way, namely Obito. But again, I do have to applaud the author for this whole, you know, conspiracy thing. Who is Toby? He peddled it on for so long, and then it was like, the whole thing with the switcheroo and Obito becoming an ally again. I have to applaud him for that. As far as the whole Toby thing, like honestly, I was on a Naruto forums for a while, a long time ago, many years ago, and I was, you know, I pulled out all these theories. The users had all these theories, and literally it was all stuff like, hey, I'm pretty sure that Obito is Toby, because if you rearrange his name, his hair fits in, you know, his hairstyle, yada yada yada, he's a Uchiha, yada yada yada. And I feel like what the author of Naruto really did was he was just making it up as he went. So he didn't have in mind when he drew Toby, hey, I'm gonna make this guy Obito one day. He was just like, I want to make some pretty cool characters for Akatsuki. Let's throw in this weird guy with this mask. And then he changed it later on, or more likely, just like in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, because there's such gaps between the publications, he got a lot of feedback from his audience, even if he didn't want to hear it, and he's like, okay, there's so many rumors that Obito is Toby, might as well throw it in. Just like in J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, he was like, oh, there's so many rumors that Snape's actually good and Dumbledore's bad. In fact, I kind of like that sort of twist. I'm gonna throw it in. Again, I don't know if that's really true, but you know, if anyone knows, if anyone has any sources or wants to clarify, go ahead and write in the comments. Otherwise, moving on. Again, now to the rest of the chapter. The rest of the chapter is just very, very sad. You know, starting from the cliffhanger from the chapter before, 686, the last page, where Obito does his thing with his time dimension warp, which literally, it literally, you know, saves Kakashi's life. He's like, Kakashi, your support for the new era is too soon for you to die, which is, you know, kind of true, but at the same time, you know, Kakashi's kind of like, what can I do? He spent like half a chapter just standing there paralyzed. I can't do anything. If I just go in there, I'll just be killed immediately. At the end of the day, you know, although Kakashi's angry about that with himself, I feel like it's a smart move, because maybe you'll be useful later on. So although you can't do anything now and you're frustrated, it's better than launching yourself in and getting killed immediately. So Naruto's there trying to heal this guy, very frustrated, even though it's pretty clear that his the ability that the Sage of Six Paths gave him, is unable to heal this guy. So he's just very frustrated. Honestly, you know, as another quick side note, I feel like Obito, I feel like his power level kind of dropped. Like, okay, from his initial stance to when he stole the power of Madara and became the Sage of the Six Paths, beast. He got a power upgrade. But then afterwards, like, sure, he was very much weakened and like his hair's turned white and everything after he was no longer the Jinchuriki. But since then, he's just been so weak. In fact, you know, even before he became the Jinchuriki, I feel like he was really weak. Like, sure, they deduced a lot of how his powers work. Like, one of his arms has to be, goes into the other dimension while this part of him stays. Still, like, before they, like, deduce his powers, he was depicted as some sort of god. Like, literally unstoppable, literally Madara. Because no one could even land a punch on him. And he could just pop in and out of the most dangerous scenarios, chat up the people there, like at the Kage's meeting, or afterwards when like Naruto is grouped with a bunch of other really strong people. He just pops in, says his thing, and just dissipates. It was just really cool. And like, sure, like they discovered his ability, but still, like, I found it kind of like they somehow downgraded his power level after they discovered his ability and how his dimensional shift works, because ultimately he was like, okay, that's all he can do with this little dimension gimmick. But before, there's a lot of mystery behind him, and it was like, what else can he do? And he did all this crazy stuff, and it was like, how could he stop the undying Amaterasu flame? Nowadays it's like everyone can stop it, but still it's like he had to do something more than just, you know, teleport to a different dimension. But now it's just like, okay, he has this one gimmick, it's kind of lame. There's a lot of mystery and potential in Obito's abilities that weren't really fulfilled. Again, I mentioned how there's a reference to like a jutsu better than time and space ninjutsu, black and white ninjutsu, which literally defies the laws of physics and time and space. And I was like, ooh, what's this crazy stuff that Obito can use? He's like one of the only people that can use black and white ninjutsu. And it's like, the author completely forgot about that stuff and moved on from it. But again, Kaguya is kind of doing that as well. Mainly it's time and space ninjutsu, but she's also somewhat defying the laws of physics by just creating tremendous amounts of chakra and energy. But we're getting off track here. The general gist of this chapter, the biggest thing I want to get across is that Obito's life has just been terrible from beginning to end. At least expressed by Black Zetsu. It's just this, the way he describes it, it's just like so sad. Like his whole life was a failure, and now he's gonna die, and it's just like horrible. It's like he's worthless, despised by both your enemies and your allies. It brings your tear to your eye, doesn't it? No friends or family to speak of. Alone, leaving nothing behind. I guess it's true, Obito didn't have parents as well, just like Naruto. Even worse than Naruto in a way, because Naruto, although he had a very tough time, he eventually found like decent friends by the time he was like 15-ish. Continuing on, it's like he lost a person most precious to him, was able to achieve his dream of becoming Hokage. So sad, you know, after giving him some purpose in the end, he just teeters around aimlessly, an ignorant fool who could never get anything right. All that is left for you to do is die your hideous death. It's so sad, but in real life, in the real world, there are people like that, and sometimes it's just like their mentality. They think it's so bad, but really they just convince themselves. But it's really just sad, and in this sense, you know, Obito sort of admits to it. Like he's like, he reacts in the worst possible way by just buying into the abuse. He's like, I suppose you're right. For a sinner like me, it's an appropriate end. And I find this very aggravating because like Naruto or Sasuke or Kakashi never really says anything. Like literally, Kakashi doesn't really say a word to Obito in this chapter. He just watches Obito die, which is so sad because Obito and Kakashi are like the same age, and they've known each other for so long. It's this relationship. It's kind of ridiculous. another loophole. Like literally, look at the chapter. Kakashi says nothing to Obito when he dies. This whole chapter. Okay, that's not true. He says Obito says something to Kakashi initially, but like the rest, most of the chapter is a dialogue between Naruto and Obito, and I find it kind of stupid and frustrating how Naruto doesn't really console Obito in any way. He's not like, don't listen to him, you're not like that. He doesn't say anything. It's just like, Obito's like, you're right, I'm a sinner, that's my life, it's good enough for a sinner like me. It's the worst possible thing, so sad and depressing. Finally, you know, you see this panel where Obito says, thank you, Naruto, which is like the most shocking thing. You see Naruto just surprised, and he's like, what? Like, you're living such a depressing life, and now you're saying thank you to me? And then he goes on this long spiel about how Naruto reminds him of himself, which makes sense because he's a reincarnation, no doubt. Again, I don't really understand how that works in the manga. I don't think it works in the real world, but again, that's my own personal opinion. And this, at least, you know, how is, like, it's kind of like, are you really your own person with your own decisions and opinions in life if you're a reincarnation of someone else, or you're just embodying someone else's personality? It's that sort of thing, and that free choice dilemma when you throw in real reincarnation into it. But again, you know, a very touching, like, I'm being serious here, not sarcastic, very touching story of Obito being re-inspired by Naruto because he reminds him a lot of himself, and then he just starts crumbling. It's this gruesome picture of his feet crumbling. It's just kind of disgusting, you know, crumbling like stone. Again, Kakashi says nothing, which is somewhat lame. I would at least said goodbye or something, but again, it's one of those tough moments where Obito's talking and saying some important stuff to Naruto. So again, he shouldn't interrupt. But okay, this is what he says. What was it? This is what Kakashi says, and I find this panel like the saddest of all. He's like, I know you will become Hokage, and the way he looks at Naruto, it's like a zoomed in picture. He turns his head and looks back, and he's all cracked up like a dried up sculpture, like all tattered up in scales, and his shoulder is already like dissipated, and he's just like, I know you will become, like, I just have to read this whole dialogue. Like, I'm sure the anime will hopefully do a ridiculously good job of putting this episode out, but just this page alone, from here on out, you'll undoubtedly still have more pain and tragedy to face, but I'm sure with that unchanging ninja way of yours, you'll see it all through. Somewhat cheesy, somewhat naive, but definitely appeal to the naive, simplistic, simpleton crowd. I didn't like that line, but the rest I did like. At some point you told me, following my own words straight ahead, unwavering, that's my ninja way, wasn't it? Again, that ninja way thing, kind of cheesy. I've overgrown that, somewhat cheesy, but the rest I did like. Naruto, you know, he's just like, I just love how the author draws it. He's like angry, but at the same time he can't cry, so he's just, all he can do is he's resigned himself because he knows he can't heal himself. So he literally is just looking down, he's like, yeah, literally just responding to Obito, knowing what's going to happen, just in pain. And Kakashi's looking down, he's reminiscing, Obito's reminiscing about Rin. Then you see his hand just dissipate in the dust, but not dissipate in the dust, more crumble like sand, or I would call it like plaster, not plaster, but like clay. He's like, Naruto, you see the flashback, his hand's gone, and then you see him look back. It's the most beautiful picture ever. He looks a lot like Gaara in this one. He's just like, I know you will become Hokage. A most amazing line ever. He's like, I know you'll become Hokage. It means so much in that one line. It's like, I know you will defeat this monster, you will bring peace to everybody. You will solve this dilemma that we live in with all these wars, which again, I'm kind of doubtful. Like, how are you going to exactly solve this? Like, Madara's plan did in fact solve it in a somewhat immoral way, but how in the hell are you going to solve something that requires eternal peace with every single person, and so that no one is left out and everyone makes friends with everyone? Even in real life, that problem has not been solved yet. So how are you going to solve it, Naruto? I feel like the author may just ignore that problem and just make him Hokage and solve the smaller problem of him defeating Kaguya and becoming Hokage. But you know, a lot of words and implications are spoken in that one sentence, and it's just very touching because of many reasons, but one of them being the fact that this man has had the most horrific, crappy life for most of his life, save his early childhood. And you know, now he's dying his crappy life, you know, just depressing, not really accomplish his purpose. He's not gonna become Hokage. He's screwed up a lot, done a lot of crappy stuff, and now all he can do is die. It's one of those sad things that does in fact happen in real life. And he's just, and of all the things he could do, he could be angry, he could be frustrated, he could be like, I deserve a full life. He just looks back at Naruto and he's like, I'm sure you'll defeat this guy. And then it's so touching, you know, he bursts into small flakes. And I just think the next page, the facial expression of Naruto is just drawn perfectly. Like, props to the author. Like, there's so many little things that the author does well. And I'm not gonna lie, there's been a lot of cheesy, crappy, naive